The Wadi Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, the Wadi Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. The Wadi Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, the Wadi Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. Peace and blessings to the whole elect, 144, the rest of 1/3. Shalom, shalom, shalom. And all my apostles, elders, and bishops who knew well, shalom, shalom. Peace and blessings to the whole elect, 144, the rest of 1/3. Shalom, shalom. Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barak call Aki. Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah. Yep, America, you are something else. Here we go.
Something went wrong. Something went terribly wrong. No, I'm telling you, nothing went wrong. It's exactly the way it's supposed to be, the way it was intended to be. See, this is why you have to understand the staggering continuity of their primitive savagery across millennia. Because America is a part of that continuum. It's not a departure from that continuum, you see? Please, call things what they are. Call things by their right names. Western history is a rap sheet of continuous crimes and atrocities. They have been a scourge upon the earth. They were a scourge to each other first. They were a scourge towards each other first. And then they were a scourge to the rest of the world the moment they learned how to sail on a boat. You've been lied to your whole life. You've been lied to your whole life, and now you don't even know what honesty sounds like. It's a completely alien language to you. You can't speak honesty. You literally don't have the vocabulary. You know, have you seen when a Muslim da'i debates a Christian? I don't know if there's any better demonstration of Western cognitive dysfunction than those debates. Personally, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of these sorts of things, this sort of format. Personally, I'm dubious about how useful they are. But if for nothing else, it's a very useful display because it's on full display. The complete Western incapacity for reason and rational thought, and their ability to even follow the thread of a conversation, the thread of a discussion for more than 3 sentences. You know, the Muslims come prepared. The Muslims come prepared. They know the Christians' book better than the Christians do. I mean, the truth of the matter is most of them don't even know what's in their Bible. Most of them don't even read their Bible. Meanwhile, if a Muslim so much as mispronounces one single letter when reciting the Quran, the whole the comment section is going to be flooded with Muslims correcting him, alhamdulillah. Meanwhile, you all can have Pete Hegseth reciting the gospel according to Quentin Tarantino, and you've got every Christian in the audience bowing their heads in solemn devotion, subhanAllah. You got deacons, Christian deacons and whatnot, saying that they need to write a new chapter, they need to write a new gospel, they need to write a new book and add it to the Bible, because there's so much in that book that's problematic for them. But anyway, you have the Muslims, right? You have the Muslims going to these debates. They bring their evidence, they bring their arguments, and they're expecting counter evidence and counter arguments. They think that's how it's going to go, but all they get is deflection. All they get is emotional rambling. All they get is incoherent, derailing, whataboutism, complete gibberish. That's what they get in response. It's completely just a showcase of Western cognitive impairment, subhanAllah. A Muslim debating a Christian is like having Usain Bolt participating in the Special Olympics, I'm telling you. But no, it's not just the Christians. I know the atheists are going to get happy when they hear me say that, but no. You're the last people on earth who should get happy. You're worse than the Christians are. Honestly, the atheists are worse than the Christians are. With their pretensions, you know, their pretensions, their poses, their formulaic, predictable, infantile arguments. They're the most unserious people that you will ever meet. These atheists, these so-called intellectuals. I've said it before, most of what we know, what we recognize as the West's worst crimes, their worst atrocities, all of that savagery that's within living memory, at the very least, that was all under the banner of so-called secularism. Their most hideous crimes all happened after the Enlightenment. That's all post-Enlightenment. No, you can't argue, you can't debate. You can't. You can't argue or debate in anything like an honest intellectual manner. You just play word games. You never have any points, you only have tactics. That's all you bring. You have tactics and techniques. You have tactics and techniques specifically for hiding the fact that you don't have any points. And this is your whole discourse. Like I said, it's all unreality. It's all false. And it doesn't resonate with anyone in the world, not anymore. But now the most colonized minds are in the West itself. Like I said, that's you. The people who are the descendants of the colonized have adopted the colonizer mindset. While their own people, the formerly colonized people, in the formerly colonized lands, they're breaking free from colonization. But in the diaspora in the West, they have absorbed mental whiteness. Even while the physically so-called white in the West are dwindling. See, this is what colonization of the mind actually means. Psychological colonization, what it actually means. It's not that someone forced you to think this way at gunpoint. It's that they created an incentive system You know, created or they engineered the conditions in the society so that thinking this way is the only path to survival, is the only path to acceptance, is the only path to anything resembling normalcy within the system. So then generation by generation, family by family, the original frameworks of your own heritage, they get replaced. Maybe your grandparents held on to something. Maybe your parents held on to a little bit. But by the time it gets to you, you know, if you were born and raised inside that system, there's almost nothing left of your original heritage, your original operating system. Just traces, just, you know, cultural performances, food, music, holidays, what have you. Holidays, ceremonies, whatever, that have been completely emptied of any deeper meaning. They're just reduced to aesthetics. Costume without content. See, the originating culture, like I say, the originating culture is declining. So the so-called civilization as a European project is running out of Europeans who are willing or able to carry it forward. So what was supposed to happen, what the natural course of history would have produced without the mental, psychological colonization, is that as the European demographic dominance declined, so would their perspectives, so would their values, so would their frameworks. And the rest of the world would have filled that space that was left by their absence. You understand? African frameworks, Asian frameworks, Islamic frameworks. The civilizational diversity that the West always suppressed and flattened, that would re-emerge as the West contracted. That's what should be happening. Instead, you're happening. You, the descendants of the colonized, the children of the enslaved people, the children and grandchildren of the dispossessed. Now you're carrying it forward. You're carrying forward this supposed to be dead way of thinking. You are now the carriers. This is why personally I don't get enthused when I hear about the statistic that Islam is spreading faster in America than anywhere else in the world. You hear that all the time. But Islam, as taught by who? As taught by what? Georgetown University? Taught by Yale, the Muslim Brotherhood, colonizer collaborators, Yankee Doodle Muslims, Muslims who hate the Arab world, Muslims who hate the Muslim governments, Muslims who want to topple all our leaders and destabilize our countries. A Muslim diaspora that has exactly the same colonizer mentality, that sees our people in the Muslim world as backward, that accuse the Ummah of being sellouts while they themselves are sitting up there in Houston and Virginia and New York paying taxes to keep America afloat. No, a Muslim diaspora of unpaid whites, you understand me? Adopting the same Western frameworks, the same hypocrisy, the same performative morality, the taqwa signaling. That's what we're going to have. See, you have the demographic numbers that the West is losing. You have the youth population that the West doesn't have. You have the geographic spread that the West never had. And you're using all of that to perpetuate the exact same dysfunction. The exact same dysfunction, the exact same dysfunctional frameworks, the exact same civilizational pathology that was used to destroy your ancestors that forced you to go over there in the first place. And you're not doing that because you're forced to. You're doing that because you opted for belonging and for assimilation to a people who do not and never will see you as people. See, the West doesn't need to survive demographically in order to survive civilizationally. It just needs you to keep believing in it. And for you to take the banner from them and carry on. And many of you do that. Even if you don't know that that's what you're doing. Because we've seen this before. Think about the global South countries that achieved formal independence from European colonialism. Okay? And then they immediately organized their economies. They organized their legal systems. They organized their educational institutions. They organized even their foreign policy around Western frameworks. Not because a gun was pointed at their head, but because the people in those countries who had been educated in Western institutions, who had absorbed Western epistemology, who had been told that development meant resembling the West, that advancement in sophistication and civilization meant resembling and copying the West, those people became the leaders. And they led their countries back into the same orbit that they had formerly liberated themselves from. They turned colonialism into neocolonialism. You can't decolonize a country from the outside in. You cannot remove the colonial power and keep the colonial mind and expect any sort of a different result, different outcome. See, that's why you have to look at the underlying causes. You have to look at the assumptions, the definitions, the epistemological frameworks. The colonial power is the colonial mind. That is the power. If you remove the soldiers but leave the epistemology, you haven't done anything. You've done nothing whatsoever to liberate yourselves. This isn't my opinion. This is documented history, the documented history of post-colonial governance on every single continent on the earth. And the same principle applies to you individually inside America, inside the West. Your own liberation, if that word is supposed to mean anything real whatsoever, it cannot happen while you are thinking inside their frameworks, while you are measuring progress by their metrics, while your definition of success is their definition of success, while your understanding of what a human being is supposed to be, is supposed to want, is supposed to do, is supposed to value, is supposed to prioritize, is their understanding. You're never going to get anywhere like this. You understand? Your ancestors didn't come from a people with no framework. This is why I'm talking to you about returning to or reconnecting with your old civilization. Because your people came from civilizations that had sophisticated frameworks, coherent frameworks, profound frameworks for understanding what a human being is, what community owes its members, how you're supposed to prioritize, what life is about, and the relationship between this life and the akhirah, this life and the next. Now, their frameworks were not primitive. They were never primitive. They weren't sitting around waiting to be replaced by something better. No, they were deliberately, systematically, violently dismantled by the West, by the colonizers, because the colonizers understood that if a people have their own framework, they cannot be fully controlled. A people who know who they are cannot ever be fully convinced to become what you need them to be, what you want them to be. So they took the framework and they replaced it with their own. They replaced it with their own way of thinking. And now you yourselves have become the vessel of that replacement framework and walking around thinking it's your framework. This is why I say the most important liberation is not political. It's not even economic. It's epistemological. It's the reclamation of the right to think from your own foundation, your own frameworks, your own standards, your own definitions of what this life is for. Everything else follows from that, and nothing else follows without it. You can't build on a foundation that's not your own. And right now, most of you are building on theirs. I'm telling you, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is literally bringing their structures down, and you're over there trying to prop them up. See, when you see them, when you see the Americans, when you see, so-called white Americans, looking, especially liberals, when you see them looking for allies, you also see this to one extent or another on the other side too, on the right wing, on the Republican side. They're all looking for allies. And when you see them looking for allies, you think that's your chance. That you think that's your chance to gain white status, like the Irish, the Italians, the Slavs, the Jews, and what have you. Because again, you don't understand the transaction. You don't understand the transaction. And you don't understand the transaction because somehow you actually still believe that the system is what it says it is. And you believe that the culture actually believes in the values that they espouse. Bless your heart. And you think that every instance of unfairness and every instance of discrimination and every instance of racism and bigotry, you think all of those instances were some kind of glitch. That's because they're ignorant. It's because they don't know any better. It's because they're really decent, good-hearted people, but they just have a fear of the other. We just have to overcome that with understanding. We have to overcome their fear. No, that's never been the issue. That's never been the issue. Total compliance is the issue. Total obsequiousness is the issue. You understand me? They don't tolerate anything other than themselves. The transaction is for you to accept that and for you to enforce that. Look, I mentioned earlier about the loneliness epidemic. You can't separate that. You can't separate these things. You can't separate that from their scrounging around for allies. It's the same thing and for the same reasons. They have no friends, they have no relationships, and they have no allies. Because they're impossible. Because they're dysfunctional. Because they're self-absorbed and because they're sociopathic and because they're predatory and parasitic. They want friends and they want partners and they want allies because they need someone to feed off of. You understand me? They need someone to use. They need someone to extract from. And they need someone to blame and to throw under the bus when things go sideways. Please understand me. You cannot be allies with people who are not even allies to their own. You understand me? I told you, slaves, collaborators, and tyrants, that's what you have. And which one they will be will depend entirely upon who they are dealing with. If they can collaborate with the tyrants, they will do it. If they can be the tyrant because of relative power asymmetry in their relationship with you, they will be the tyrant with you. And they'll be the slave if the power asymmetry is not in their favor. How can you be allies with that? There's no principle here. Yes, okay, I'm talking primarily to Muslims, to my own people, and to the people of the Global South. But Westerners and Americans, you should understand this too. You have to understand this too about yourselves and about each other. Because you're not only this way with us, you're just this way. And you ought to try to understand that. And like I said, I know that many of you will object to what I'm saying, and you will tell me and you will assure me that you are the exception to everything that I'm saying. You know, the not all Westerners argument. But I've said this before. Maybe you are. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't the exception. But just the fact that you activate the exception argument in the first place as a reflex response to completely valid and completely accurate civilizational criticism indicates that you are not an exception whatsoever. That's the same old dishonesty. You know, that disingenuous pointing out of an anomaly in order to so-called disprove an entirely legitimate generality. Because if you were truly an exception to the rule, you would be agreeing with the criticism, not getting defensive about the criticism. But like I said, all they ever do is pursue self-validation. Never forget that. All they ever do is pursue self-validation. You absolutely have to know this anytime that you're dealing with them. I'm telling you, there's always an ulterior motive, and it's always the same ulterior motive to get you to legitimize their falsehood. You know, including the falsehood that, for example, they believe in human rights. They care about human rights. They care about peace. They care about nonviolence. They care about equality. They care about tolerance. They care about the protection of children, the protection of women, or whatever the case may be. No, they don't care about those things. They don't care about any of those things. Not on a civilizational level, not culturally. No, they don't care about any of those things. There's no evidence whatsoever that they care about these things, and there is nothing but evidence that they don't care about any of these things. In fact, that they're hostile to all of these things. But they will, you know, for example, they will hurl accusations against, say, China, or against the Muslim world, or against Africa, or what have you. Whatever the case is, you're undemocratic. You're undemocratic. You oppress this group or that group. You don't have the freedom of this or the freedom of that, and so forth. And then you get tricked into proving to them that no, we're good. We're good. We have rights. We have freedom. No, boss, we're as good as you. They trick you into that argument. And then mission accomplished for them. That's all they're interested in. They don't care about the rights of your people, not whatsoever. Not at all. They only want you to affirm the lie that they are people who care about rights. Because they do not. But they are obsessed. They are obsessed with making everyone pretend that they are a people who care about rights. And that's the only reason that they ever accuse anyone of any sort of a violation. That's the only reason they do it. Because no matter what it is, whatever the violation it is, whatever violation they're accusing someone else of committing, they already committed worse than that before lunchtime. Because this is the only way that they can assume any sort of moral authority, is by means of you playing along with the idea that they have any moral authority. I'm telling you, it's like there's infinite layers, subhanAllah, there's infinite layers of dishonesty. You have no idea. And like I say, especially if you live over there, and you've lived over there for generations, I'm telling you the truth. You don't have any idea because you think the same way, because you are the same way. By means of you playing along with the idea that they have any moral authority. I'm telling you, it's like there's infinite layers, subhanAllah, there's infinite layers of dishonesty. You have no idea. And like I say, especially if you live over there, and you've lived over there for generations, I'm telling you the truth. You don't have any idea because you think the same way, because you are the same way. Even you calling yourself an exception is just another layer of the dishonesty. You have to understand, it's all fraudulent, all of it. It's all fraudulent across the board, start to finish. Conservative, liberal, doesn't matter. It's a smokescreen. This is all part of why they are the way they are. The foundational reasons of why they are the way they are. They think virtue and they think morality can be best performed by, this way or by that way. That's all that is. That's all that your right and your left are. That's all. That there is no real right or left. You understand? There's just different ways of performing the theater of goodness. You understand? Instead of being good, Marx makes me good. That's the proof. Conservatism is the proof that I'm good. This ideology or that ideology is the proof. They want to refer character judgment to any sort of credentials or any sort of evidence other than actions. Right? I'm a socialist. That's the proof that I'm a good person who cares about the poor and the working class because I want them to get stuff via my advocacy of socialism. I'm a capitalist, so officially I'm a good person who cares about people's freedom to pursue wealth in the free market so that they can get stuff. My way for people to get stuff is more moral than your way for people to get stuff. Meanwhile, the whole crux of both positions is material acquisition. That's the whole crux of it. You can drink, you can do drugs, you can be promiscuous, you can watch porn, you can backbite, you can blaspheme, you can lie, you can break promises, you can doom scroll, you can waste your time, you can be malicious, you can be petty, you can be deceitful, you can be a coward, you can be all of that, no problem. Your official ideology is a substitute for character. You understand? Performance. the morality of style over substance. There's no real belief in anything. Understand this. There's no real conviction that exists in the absence of external observation for them. Because that's the programming. The West never prioritized morality, never prioritized character, not at all. It's only ever been decorative, like I've said many times. And even if you want to be a moral person, the concept itself has been emptied for you, so you don't even know how to do it. So you see, this so-called civilization, this culture, which is inherently so stubbornly primitive, so underdeveloped morally, so underdeveloped intellectually, is so insular, so provincial, so self-absorbed, it could only ever have spread through violence. And its violence is itself an element of that primitivity and that lack of development, that lack of moral character, that lack of intellectual complexity, that lack of intellectual depth. And that violence, like I said, has always also guaranteed that they never faced correction, that they never had to change. Which also means paradoxically that their violence has rendered them incredibly weak, incredibly feeble. No, it's a monstrously flimsy culture. As again is demonstrated by things like when they debate the Muslims. No, the violence and the power and the wealth that they accumulated by means of the violence and the coercive power has meant that they have never had to build themselves as a society. They never had to build themselves as a people. Understand, this is why you have the three archetypes in the West, the Western archetypes, the tyrant, the collaborator, and the slave. Because it's always about violence and coercive power. It's always about that. And if you don't have the advantage in any sort of power asymmetry, then you acquiesce. Slave or collaboration, not confrontation, not challenge, not rebellion, not even independent construction, parallel construction, just kowtowing, just surrender, just bandwagoning. 4 out of 5 were serfs, docile, passive, obsequious. This is the real Western disposition. When you don't see power in truth, when you don't see power in morality, and you worship only violent, coercive power, you as a people will always bow down. Comfort and convenience over conviction, always. See, I know that you'll hear me. Many of you will hear me. You like hearing me call out the West. But you only like it because you're not benefiting from being Western the way you would like to be benefiting from being Western. I know that your real issue isn't what the West is or how the West is. It's that you yourself are not at the top tiers of the Western hierarchy. That's the real reason. Just like the people who started America in the first place. You oppose tyranny when you are not the tyrant. See, you listen and you think that I'm talking like I'm your ally. Because you think that I'm against the people who are making your lives miserable. So you think I'm your ally. But I am, it's true, I am. I am against the people who are making your lives miserable. But you are those people. You yourselves are those people.
That's right, and that's the truth. Big time. Big time. Where we at? Psalms 68. Come on, you stupid ass pad. Psalm 64, in 8. Where we at? So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. You're done, devils. And Shahid Balson is one of us. He's an Israelite, speckled bird. You're done, devil. Wall, a ball, ba ball.